This isn't like uni. This isn't like school. Some of this stuff will apply to you and some of it won't. So take what you need, take what's relevant, and leave the rest. Is very much my philosophy. And enjoy the process. What's meant for you is not going to miss you in this session. The things that are meant for you will hit you like a ton of bricks. I promise you that. So yeah, so just relax and enjoy, ask questions. That's a really great way, of course, of solidifying what you learn and starting to integrate the process before you even get off the call. And if you have any questions, then feel free to go nuts in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go. But also, if you've got a longer question or you've got a longer contribution that you want to make, then feel free to pop your hand up into the raise hand function. I'll finish my train of thought, and I'd love to essentially put you on the hot seat and hear what's going on and do a bit of live coaching as well. So just to give you some options for communication and give you a sense of, how to interact today before we get started. Beautiful. So I've actually got quite a punchy question to ask everyone straight out of the gate, which is, what would you do with an extra $40,000 in a year? Now, the purpose of this question, Jen's got the right idea already. I'm seeing what she's doing with her eyes. But the purpose of this question, of course, is not to have you go straight into your logical brain and go, oh, well, that's not a possibility for me, and do all of that kind of poo-pooing. The reason that I asked this question is actually to engage with that part of your brain that goes, what if? What would I do? How would I use that money? What would it go towards? What is important for me at this period of time in my life? Is it just money for money's sake at this point in time? Would I invest it in property? Would I use it to kind of squirrel away and put towards growing a family? Would I go back to school? Would I quit my job and become a yacht bunny and go, sailing on the Mediterranean for a year? What would I actually do if I was to achieve or earn this extra money? And the reason I say 40,000 is because what we're playing for here today is not small sums of money. This is not a couple of dollars on the hour here and there. This is really getting to engage straight off the gate with what is really possible when you start to kind of expand and think more creatively and innovatively, and also engage with what it is that you actually want to achieve out of this process in the long term. Because money is just an energy, and it really is just an exchange for what it is that you want to create in your life. And so you can use it as a really great amplifier for all the good you want to do in the world, all of the life you want to live, or all of the fun and all the enjoyment you want to have. Or you can let it be really mundane and boring and not exciting. So I'd love to hear from you a couple of examples of what you would actually want to do if you were to have that extra money and all of the rest of your daily expenses were covered with what you already earn. Any ideas?
I was typing away, but I'll just share it if that's okay.
Go, Jen.
I said I would travel, go out. I really like to shout friends, like go out and have dinner and be able to shout. And house investment.
So a bit more living and then a bit more investing and squirreling away for later.
Yes.
Smart. I like that. All right, Beck, you've got your hand up rearing to go. I can't wait to hear this. Oh, no, you're on mute, hon.
That's how I always start my Zoom calls. Nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed.
It's a bit of a standing joke, Jen and Annalisa. When we all used to work together, I'd go to speak and I'd always be on mute, and everyone just knew that that's how it would start. It was really funny when you asked this question, Alex, because straight away I went, pay off the mortgage or, something really practical. But then I started thinking about it and going, well, what do I actually really want to do? And I probably have never truly explored that because I've just been in the grind, you know, kids' school fees, mortgage, pay the
Yeah.
bills, you know, that sort of stuff. And it doesn't really open your mind to going, well, what's the treat in it for me? And there
Yeah.
would be travel. Like when I started thinking about it after Jen responded, I'm like, there would be travel and it would be very comfortable.
Beautiful. Exactly. And that's the whole purpose of this bit, right? Is that when we think about mortgages and when we think about investments and things like that, those are really important, obviously, but are they motivating? And that's sometimes what we want to tap into when it comes to playing in this kind of game, right? Because we are going to be getting outside of our comfort zones in these conversations potentially. And so when we come into them, we want to make sure that we're doing it for a reason that's really going to set our soul on fire. And
I think there's a different sort of motivation though. Like the motivation to pay your mortgage is like you just got to pay it. What happens to you if you don't? And I certainly have got very conditioned to all of those motivations that you are scripted with about your kids and you know what your role is, making sure the house is organized, you know, all of that sort of stuff, rather than the motivations about, wow, what could I do? And I look at the young ones I work with and they think like that.
Yeah.
So that's something that is really interesting and something I'd like to explore more.
Brilliant. Good to get. Good to get. And something you can definitely play a bit more with in this session and just, be open to having that kind of more open-minded, that more kind of like broader sense of what is possible, and also using it as a more expansive and generative conversation rather than, you know, I have X amount to pay off my mortgage potentially, and so therefore that's how much money I need to earn, and so therefore you're kind of limiting, like, in all these ways potentially. So good to get. I really like that. Sheens, were you going to mention something? If you put your hand up, or
I was kind of thinking along, well, I was a bit like Beck, you know, same age group as Beck. And as usual, we haven't changed. We still start to think the same way. But along the lines of, you know, the practical side of what you could do with that extra money. And then, you know, just sort of like in the conversations that I've had around, you know, things just not satisfying me as much as they used to. You know, in some ways teaching's not doing, like I said before, you know, teaching's not really doing it for me as such. So then I started thinking about, well, okay, if I had that 40,000, I would actually spend it on me. And, you know, start to look at doing some of those things like travel, or, you know, always wanted to learn the piano, you know, like have some lessons, you know, do things that would give me a little bit more of a buzz, and the focus would be on me, you know. And I'm like Beck, you know, I've had all the years of my children growing up and having to, you know, give to them and look after them, and you know, they came first, or I always came last, sort of thing. So I think I would probably look at changing the order around.
Fair enough. And I love that as well. And it's so awesome that you guys are at a stage in your life now where these things are really coming to the forefront of, like, you know, what else is possible for me? What else could I do in this stage in the game? It's really cool. Thanks for sharing, Sheens. Annalisa, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Looks like I got my video to work.
Yes, it's so lovely to see you.
I probably coming at this at a bit more of a savage kind of point of view of getting my revenge and getting my time back for things that were wasted in my past, where I just took what I was given instead of standing up for myself and asking for what I actually deserved, and, you know, getting stepped on by a whole heap of assholes that didn't deserve my time and energy. And I don't want to spend the rest of my career in that mode. I'm ready to learn some new tricks.
Fair enough. Awesome. And so with that $40,000, did you have any kind of thoughts around what it is that you would want to do with that money? whether it's travel, go back to school, maybe leverage
think-
time off.
Yeah. More than anything else, it's actually, it's just the boring stuff about security. But, you know,
Perfect.
it's, you know, having learnt recently that my husband, who makes, you know, $40,000 less than me, has double the social, not social security, the retirement funds that I do. And that is not good.
Yeah.
And although we're in a fabulous, stable relationship, and I have 100% sort of trust in our relationship, I want my revenge, financial revenge.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's actually funny that you bring that up, because I've got really good friends who are a couple, both of them are engineers, and they are playing a game with each other at the moment of who can be the breadwinner in the house, because they're both in their late 20s. And so they're kind of going this and this in terms of incomes and that kind of thing, and promotions at the moment. And so they're having a bit of fun with that game of going, you know, can you keep up with me? And, oh, can you keep up with me? And just having a bit of fun with it. So it's, it's really cool. It's cool to start bringing in that kind of, that kind of like healthy, like using that as kind of a bit of a motivation, right? To start having these conversations and coming into this space. So it's really awesome that you're here. Very cool. So just to take it one step further, we don't need to spend too much time here, but I did just want to go above and beyond on this one. So if you were to get an extra $40,000 this year, what difference would that make in the next 5 years? And I think Annalisa made a really awesome point just then around looking at retirement funds and things like that, right? Is the impact of making these decisions is not just for this 1 year. It compounds over time. And so the sooner you can get into the game and the sooner you can start engaging with this stuff seriously, the bigger impact it can have on you over time. So just food for thought, one to take home with you and digest a little bit, is really, really landing on the impact of starting to engage with this stuff now, so that you have time for those, for the impacts to really compound over time. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what I did with my 40K and how I got there and how I got here. So I think the first thing that's really important to shout out is I was born into a farming family, a really hardworking dairy farming family, and I wasn't taught how to do this shit in my household at all. You know, this was not a topic of conversation. My parents were not high-flying lawyers or business people in that regard. For them, money was hard earned and took a lot of work and labor, and that was very much the mentality that I was brought up around, was that you worked really hard for your money and you accepted what you were given. And I think even for me, coming into the technology space, which is kind of where I've been in my career until this point, it was always a real privilege for me to even have a job that wasn't a manual labor job. And for me to come into an office every day and, you know, work 8 till 5 or whatever it might have been, was always seen as a real luxury by my family. So when I came into this world, that was very much my mentality, that I needed to work really hard and that I needed to prove myself before anything else could happen, essentially. And so I was really fortunate to, after uni, I studied psychology and economics, and straight after uni, I landed a position with an education technology platform and got to work. I started the team in customer support. So I came in as a customer support assistant on kind of minimum wage type of situation. I was fortunate enough to end up in a team lead position not long after arriving at the business. And so that was kind of my first experience with like a promotion and that whole journey, and not only starting to get a sense of my salary increasing above minimum wage, which in my mind at that time, I was paying, I think, $70 a week in rent in my university flat. And I was like, oh my God, more than minimum wage. What am I going to do with all this money? Happy to be here. Thanks very much. All of that kind of stuff. And then from there, I started to get a bit more of a sense of the lay of the land and the people around me and the difference it was making for others that they were actually engaging in these conversations. At this stage, I was still just happy to be here, happy-go-lucky, and not really interested in really putting my hat in the ring. Fast forward a few years, I relocated from New Zealand to Melbourne, and I had my first year in a kind of account management type of role. So it was my first year, it was my first experience with being kind of on the coalface when it came to how much revenue a business was bringing in. And I had a really good year. By all accounts, by all measures, I had a really good year in terms of the numbers and the revenue and what was required in my job in terms of KPIs. And that kind of sparked an interest in me, as well as some coaching work that I had taken on for the first time that year, that had really opened up my mind in terms of like what else was possible for me outside of what I had just always accepted, because I'd always been happy to be there. I'd always worked hard, and I'd always felt pretty uncomfortable about the thought of actually engaging in these kinds of conversations. And, you know, what were people going to think about me for, you know, being, I think at that time I was 23, for being 23 years old and coming into these, you know, pay review conversations and being like, actually, that's not good enough. So I had a lot of emotional charge around having these conversations. It made me really uncomfortable. But I knew in 2019, I knew that I had done the work that year and that I had the evidence to back up the request that I was making and to begin the negotiation. So fast forward through all of that very uncomfortable moment for me, which was honestly probably only 5 minutes in time just to open up that conversation. I'll talk more about my strategies and how those have evolved over time as we go through as well. But what happened as a result of that conversation is I actually started to get taken more seriously in the business that I was working in. I actually opened up opportunities that didn't exist before that in terms of what was possible for where I actually wanted to take my career, and started to have some real agency in the direction it was taking, and was able to kind of leverage the good work that I'd done as well as my kind of strength in that in order to open up other opportunities. So it's not necessarily in my case from that conversation that I was in a position where I went into that conversation, asked for more money, and they were like, you're absolutely right, there you go. There was a few more steps in the middle, and my avenue or my priority at that point in time was actually promotion, more responsibilities, and to step up and make more of a contribution in the business, and then to be compensated for that accordingly. Fast forward another year to 2021, where I actually was able to, for the first time since moving to Melbourne, actually really start to save money. And I think that's something that often when we talk about saving and the rhetoric around that is quite often there's a real mentality around scrimping and saving, looking at your expenses, cutting your expenses down, and really contracting when it comes to your finances. Whereas what I really, really recognized in 2021 was that for the first time, I actually had so much money coming in, or enough money coming in, that I could really start to save in a really serious way. And so I actually whittled my savings away, as well as having a good time. I whittled my savings away so that I had a base of money, and also invested into other coaching so that I could resign from my job and have a bit of tide over while I started my own business. So that was my next game, was actually having that money set aside so that I could have that sense of security as I transitioned into starting my own business. So that was my why. That was why I was really starting to have confidence in those conversations and what I was actually playing for. The fact that the vision that I had and what I wanted to create, the power that I felt behind that was greater than my discomfort around having these conversations. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my journey and why I'm here, and why this topic area is actually so important for me personally, because I've seen what opening up these conversations in small ways can actually do for not only our quality of life, but also our general satisfaction, our general energy, and also what's possible for us in order for us to start thinking a bit bigger about what it is we might like to do with our time on this rock. So let's get this money. That's why we're here. And yeah, so that's a little bit of context into my journey. Since kind of going through that whole journey for myself, I've helped a number of other people with their salary negotiations and things like that as well. Having a few conversations and helping someone through a situation where they were a long-term employee and essentially went into the room and came out with an extra $30,000 for the same role. Like, it's just incredible what is possible and what is available once we start opening up these conversations. And the real possibility that I want to put out for the room today as we get started here is that if you're not having these conversations and prepared to kind of have these conversations, it's not necessarily that is going to be the kind of the gains for you right here and now, but definitely those impacts will compound over time. And you're certainly not going to be maxing out what is available for you in terms of the range that you could sit within until you start having these conversations and having them powerfully. So today we're going to explore a couple of different angles. I really wanted to bring through today from my experiences in business, from more of a team lead perspective, manager perspective, around what actually the benefits are of engaging in negotiation, because I think oftentimes the benefits are pretty obvious from a individual's perspective, like we've just been talking about, and what's possible. But it's also really, really a great tool or a great culture to have within a business in terms of fostering that sense of business community. I also touch on where we can go wrong in these conversations, some common threads that play out, and also some tools that can really help you get going on this journey as well. So, why does negotiating matter? Quite often we think about this in terms of, as I was saying, in terms of the individual. Obviously, the benefit to the individual was massive from being able to actually unlock greater levels of income, being able to play with potentially exchanging what might be a higher salary for time off and being able to buy some of your time back. There's incredible benefits for individuals, but when we scale up and look at a team culture across the board, when we actually start to have these conversations powerfully, what it can open up within a business or within a team is your team members feeling empowered and feeling like they know what it is that they bring, and they know what their strengths are, and they know what those strengths are worth in the market. That also provides an avenue for clarity around team roles and responsibilities, clarity also around career progression opportunities, and how a particular individual can start to add more value in your business over time. It's also important in terms of having that fair energy exchange so that employees feel valued and respected in the work that they do. The flow-on effects from that are massive when we look at employee engagement, when we look at motivation, when we look at enthusiasm and focus. There's been a lot of rhetoric recently about this idea of quiet quitting in the workplace, where you just kind of phone it in, do the bare minimum, and fulfill the requirements of your job and do nothing more. And this is actually one of the tools that I see as being most empowering for individuals in the team, and to kind of mitigate in a business sense against that quiet quitting culture, where if you really create an environment where people feel like they can have a genuine impact and a genuine say in their own career trajectory, and also in really developing those skills of being able to negotiate, that opens up motivation, enthusiasm, and focus on levels that might not be possible otherwise, or might not just eventuate otherwise, because people are putting their focus into other areas other than into business. It also flows through, of course, from this into a higher standard of results, and also into business growth. When people are more engaged in work, when people are more creative, when people are more innovative, and people are really being encouraged to give all of their strengths that they can or that they have available into work, then that has massive benefits for the business in terms of what's possible revenue wise, growth wise, and all those other great indicators, and also helps to mitigate against things like employee turnover, which are really, really expensive for businesses, and performance management. Again, really, really expensive for businesses to go through performance management processes. It's something that I've had experience with in the past. And it's such an amazing situation that you can get into where you actually don't need so much of a focus in those areas. And then you can use the budget that you might have used in that area and give it back to the employees where it matters. So now into the fun stuff. What can get in the way? So when I ask what can get in the way, I recognize, of course, that there are things that can be happening on the business side of things that we aren't necessarily privy to from an employee's perspective. That's part of the dance of negotiation, is recognizing that you only have, in your perspective and in your situation, you only have half of the information required to kind of like bring the negotiation together. And that's why the dance is so important, because you have the half of the information that is what motivates you, what lights you up, what your research and what you've done in terms of understanding your position in the market and what could be possible for you if you've been elsewhere, and also what it is that you actually want out of your career longer term. On the other side of the fence, from an employer's perspective, they have all the information around budgets, finances, all of that kind of stuff, but they might not necessarily have an understanding of what it is that you actually want and where you might be best placed. They might be able to see opportunities that you couldn't see from where you are, and see what could be possible for you in terms of serving the business goals and the business objectives. But until they have an understanding of what it is that actually lights you up and what it is that you're good at, then they also only have half the information. And so that's why when we look at coming together in a negotiation setting, it's about bringing both of those halves together so that you have that sharing of information and finding that kind of middle ground. So when we look at coming into these conversations from an employee perspective, what kinds of things can get in the way for us? Feel free to put your hand up or jump in the chat. Rebecca, please. You're going for favorite student, aren't you?
I am. I want to be number one. I think one of my experience would be assumptions that we make about, so we apply for a job and we think they know what they want. So we make assumptions about the fact that they're right in that regard. We make assumptions about where we fit or what it is that we're going to be able to do. Yeah, you're right, Jen. And that gets in the road at both levels, I think. People will make assumptions about you coming in based on what they know about you, which will generally be they've Googled you or they've heard from someone who knows someone whose sister used to work with you, whatever. So, yeah, what will management think of me, e.g. me, who's always got something to say? Yeah, we don't need their on the team. So, yeah, I think that's a significant thing on both sides.
Yeah, I would absolutely 300% agree with that. And that's if both sides, and I think, Beck, that's why this is so interesting. And I think particularly in your situation where you are right now in your career in a couple of different ways, having these negotiation skills on both sides of the table are massive. Because if you're on the other side of the table and you're the one who's hiring, and you also don't have any negotiation skills, and you also don't have any kind of flexible thinking at play, and for you it's a really fixed outcome that you're trying to achieve, and you haven't prioritized what it is that's important to you in this role, then you also are going to be hindering the process and preventing from the best outcome to kind of come together.
Absolutely.
Very good. Gold star for you. James, go on.
I also look at it from the other side as well, from my own assumptions about me. you know, in terms of, I go into these things and I never think I'm good enough. You know, so it's always that, you know, I always think I could be doing more, or I should be doing more, or I should be more like that person, or, you know, and so my own sort of idea about myself also can be a hindrance.
Yeah. I hear you on that. And thank you also for bringing that up, because there are some tools later on in this that are really going to help with that and help you to kind of, it's actually not something that we talk about very much around negativity bias and how much our brain is geared towards being really, really perceptive of, you know, critical thoughts, negative feedback, constructive criticism, all of that kind of stuff. Our brain really clings on to that. And so we actually need to create in our brain, in our environment, we actually need to create a ratio of 5 positive thoughts or 5 positive beliefs or 5 strengths-based feedback, pieces of feedback to every one critique, to actually kind of like create that balance. Like, that's how powerful it is. So
It's that standing joke. It's not even a joke. It's well researched. You know, a female, and it's interesting, we're all female. A female reads the jobs JMP and goes, oh, I can't do that. I nail everything else, but that one thing I haven't had any experience in, so I'm not qualified. A guy reads it and goes, I can do 2 of those 15 things. I'm a shoo-in. Because it's a different way of thinking about it. And I think, you know, we also get into some of those teachings that we've learnt really subtly along the way around that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Thanks, Beck. Annalisa, take it away. Oh, you're on mute, honey.
Sorry, everyone.
No, you're
I was just going to say, just the conversation is the bit that is the biggest barrier for me. I feel like job interviews are the most mad thing. They assume that you're going to be able to, the company's going to be able to make a judgment about you, and you're going to be able to communicate everything of you in this one interview or this one conversation. But there's 100 things they haven't asked you, or there might be 100 things you didn't say, or you stumble over your words in a moment of nervousness, and suddenly, you know, you're written off as someone who can't communicate properly. Like, it's so knife edge, and that's kind of the bit that scares me about the conversation.
Yes, and that's a really, really important point as well, is that, like, that pressure almost that we put on ourselves, right, that it has to go perfectly, and that we have to nail, you know, we have to come through so slick, so smooth, nail every single aspect of it, feel cool, calm, and collected the whole way through. When in actual fact, the main way that we actually learn how to do any of this stuff is through practice and through creating safe to fail environments where we can actually practice some of these skills, right, and put them into practice before we get into that room, so that when we do get into that room, we're at least a little bit more grounded in what it is that we're going to say and what it is, how it is that we're going to be in that room, but also giving ourselves grace that we're just, you know, the first time you do this, you're not going to be as good at it as the 10th time you do this, but that's why you have to get on this journey, because the sooner that you start, the sooner that you're going to be good. Go on, Beck. Yeah, off mute when you're ready.
Thank you. I just want to actually pose a question, Alex.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in your view on this, because I mean, Sashina, Annalisa, and myself are experienced educators. You're not telling us anything we don't tell kids about how to prepare for an oral, how to prepare for an exam, what you need to do when you're going into something that's unfamiliar. It's a really interesting scenario where I feel like when you said that, I've gone, yeah, I've heard that. Well, where's my agency? I'm talking, you know, trying to teach kids about agency. And for those of you who aren't in South Australia, because it's only me and Annalisa is actually leading a project statewide that's all about increasing student agency. It's brilliant. And yet here we are as women going, I don't have any agency in this. Why does that happen? Because there's no one in this room that's dumb.
I'm so glad you asked that, Beck. And that leads perfectly into my next point. So I'm going to talk about this under this umbrella, which is the first hurdle when it comes to getting into a salary negotiation is not getting into a salary negotiation at all. Surprise, surprise. I've heard a lot of rhetoric from people, and I've experienced it for myself, where it's like, oh no, the timing's not right. I've got to wait for it to come up. I've got to wait till the end of the year. I've got to wait till they float over to my desk with a piece of paper that says, you know, Beck, finally, you know, here's your $40,000. We value you so much in this business, and now we're going to use our hard-earned coins to prove it to you. We tend to wait for it to come up. And then in waiting for it to come up, we then, if it does eventually come up, we can often be so blindsided in that conversation that it just kind of passes us by anyway. So often when we dig into why it is that we're waiting, or what it is that we're waiting for, or what it is that's preventing us from just kind of, you know, bloody well reaching out and sending an email and having that agency like you described, Beck, is often the emotional charge that we put on these things. So we can intellectualize them to the cows come home about process and what needs to be done and strategy and all of those kinds of things. And believe you me, we will be strategizing till the cows come home in a second. But if we don't take a moment to actually neutralize the emotions that are present for us and create space for those emotions that are present in us when we think of these things, or when we come into these situations, then if we do somehow get the words out, we're not going to initiate the conversation powerfully, and we're not going to lead the conversation, and we're not going to be really fully present in the conversation, because we're so caught up in what it is that we're making it mean that it doesn't flow in the same way. And so this is where we really get into the conversation around energetics. And not only is it about the content of what you say, and it's so funny because I've had experience in the past with somebody where their very well-meaning boyfriend had given her some kind of like finance bro salary negotiation script to follow, and she'd gone, you know, like, follow these 10 points and you'll get 10, you know, $100,000 extra, or whatever they promise. And so she went into this conversation with this script, and it absolutely flopped, because it wasn't really the words that she was saying, it's the way that she was engaging in the conversation at large. And that's really, when we look at this first point, that's really what it is about, is really, really addressing the emotions that underlie all of this and creating space to neutralize those before we even get into the room. Yes, Annalisa, classic mansplaining. So I'm going to, when we get towards the end of the session and we're looking at tools, I'll guide you through an exercise that's really, really powerful in terms of actually creating that emotional neutrality, just as a starting point. There's so much work that you can do in this area around embodying the values that you want to bring into these conversations and neutralizing the emotions. And that's something that through NLP we actually learn a lot about and are trained in on quite a significant level. But I just wanted to give you something quick as well that you can kind of start to practice right away, that's actually really, really effective in terms of neutralizing these emotions. So we'll look at that in a second, later on in the session. So yeah, it really does come back to that classic question of like, what does it say about you if you ask for more? What are you making it mean? Or what stories are you telling yourself about, you know, about what it means to come into that conversation and say, actually, I'm not happy with that number. Or actually, this is more what I had in mind. What are we making it mean about ourselves to actually do that? And really being honest around our internal monologue on these things and what it is that's preventing us from engaging in these conversations powerfully from an emotional standpoint. So we'll come back to that point. Put a pin in it for now. So the second challenge that we often run into is not knowing our value, which, by the way, I'm going to say this right from the get-go. Understanding your value in a business sense and the strengths that you bring and the value that you can bring into a business setting is completely separate from your self-worth. Your worth as a human being, your identity, they are completely separate things. And the more work that you can do to detangle them, if they are tangled, then the better off you're going to be, not only in these conversations, but in your life at large. When shit goes south in your career, if you make it mean something about you, you're going to have a really tough time. And when things go good for you in your career and you're doing all of that tangling of, oh yes, this means that I'm a good human being and I'm a good servant of whatever, then yeah, it makes these conversations much harder when you have that tanglement of self-worth and just the cold hard facts of the value that you're bringing in. And it also makes it harder to hear feedback because you're filtering on that self-worth kind of paradigm. So problem 2 is not knowing what it is that not knowing what it is, what the value is that you bring into a business, not having an understanding of that, and also not knowing what it is that you want to get out of this negotiation. What is it that you're playing for? What is it that you're doing it for? And what kinds of benefits are important to you? Because it might not just be money. That's the thing. This is all like, some of this is not about money. A lot of it's not about money. So the first one that I want to talk to here is coming back to knowing your number. So we're going to come back and look at specifically the strengths and the value that you're bringing into the organization from that level. But I just wanted to take this time to talk about actually some of the data that we can dig up that can help to color our argument or our evidence when we come into these conversations. And the purpose of having this information at your fingertips is really just to build that body of certainty within you to go, yeah, well, actually, you know, someone of my years of experience, which is so, so important when you look at this data, to filter by years of experience. So important, because oftentimes people come into Glassdoor or similar websites, they see the average, they go, oh, I'm at the average or I'm slightly above, there's no way I can ask for more money. Absolutely not the case. The second that you start to filter by years of experience, that data completely shifts and changes, and it opens up a whole world of possibility. And in any follow-up sessions as well, I'm really interested to do a deep dive. We don't have time for it today, but to do a deep dive into some specific examples with you guys as well around what is possible when you really start to play with that data and look at it in all kinds of different ways. And really play with like, what kinds of arguments could you come up with to justify X number of dollars or whatever it might be. So yeah, platforms like Glassdoor are really incredible for things like this. When you have more specialized job titles, obviously you want to then definitely look at your value add activities on top of that. So you might get a kind of baseline understanding from Glassdoor of kind of where you want to start. And then you want to look at, if you are someone who is only getting positive feedback, then first of all, you probably need to have that conversation with your managers, and no better way is there for you to have that conversation than for you to bring this process to light, because believe you me, if there's things that you can do to improve, they will let you know in these conversations once you start making a really good case. But you want to look at your value add. Are you just an excellent operator? Are you absolutely like the easiest person alive to work with? Like, look at all the feedback that you're receiving, both within the organization and also from any external parties that you work with. Look at any extra projects you're taking on that are above and beyond your responsibilities, any awards that you might have won. When we look at KPIs or any performance indicators and things like that, which, by the way, you absolutely should have in your roles. Every role, in my opinion, should have really solid and clear KPIs. And if they don't, then this is like the first place to start. Because you can see now that when you don't have clear KPIs in play, it makes all of this kind of stuff harder. And sometimes it's on purpose. So really, really, really this, like, I cannot stress how important it is to make sure that you have such a clear runway and a clear understanding of what it is that your performance is being measured against. And I'm seeing hands go up across the board. All right, Beck.
Annalisa and I might be about to ask exactly the same question.
Amazing. You put your hands up in unison.
Currently living in a situation where we're still creating our job. So we can't have KPIs because they're still evolving.
Okay. What is your, so I was actually having this conversation with someone the other day in a very passionate manner. I don't care if your KPIs should always be evolving. As your role changes and grows, your KPIs should always be evolving. You should always have a baseline. You should always have, if everything goes to hell in a handbasket, these are the things that matter. And it doesn't matter where you go from there. You can do whatever you want on top of that, but it's not acceptable to be in a situation where you don't have that clarity of a baseline.
Thank you. Just
Any
reinforced what I
questions?
thought.
My question was a bit different.
Okay,
And
good.
To show the difference between Beck's pathway to this job that we've got now and mine. What's KPI?
Oh, sure.
Like, I seriously don't know what you mean.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that, Annalisa. Great question. It's a key performance indicator. So essentially, it's just having that really clear understanding of what is it. Essentially, the question that you want to be asking is, what does success look like for you? What does it look like over, say, a month, over a quarter, over a year? What does it look like for you to be nailing your job, or even just passing in your job? And then you can add nailing on top of that. But it's really just having that clarity of like what things are important to you in your role. And this is something that you can, and I would suggest that you do, flag with your manager, your line manager, around really making sure that you guys together are creating that clarity of what it is that's important to you in your role. Because when things get busy, when things get stressful, when things get carried away, then if you don't have that clarity, you don't have that baseline, then shit will go haywire real quick, and it's bad for the business. It's terrible for you as an individual. From a psychological safety perspective, it's actually really dangerous to not have that clarity. Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Annalisa, because sorry, Jen, key performance indicator. I'll stop using so much slang and so much jargon. But yeah, I cannot stress enough from a psychological safety perspective how important it is to have a clear understanding of what your performance is being measured against. And unfortunately, in business, one of the things that can happen is that clarity isn't created on purpose so that these conversations become more challenging, or so that the business has more flexibility in terms of what it is that you are there to do, because they think that it's a good thing, but it's not. Promise you that. Sheens, talk to me.
Only kind of backing it up in the sense that education has never had key performance indicators. We still don't, all right? And in a lot of cases, you can sometimes end up in positions that don't actually have role statements. And trying to even get that happening can be quite challenging. And that's why in education, you don't generally go for a pay rise on your own. It's normally negotiated through your award, and everybody is the same. So that's why the guys are finding it a little bit different. And in some ways, for people in education coming into a business and having KPIs, it can be quite scary in a sense, because you suddenly think, oh, I've got all these things I've got to measure up against, and I've got to be doing all this stuff. And what you forget is that you actually have been doing that in your job. It's just never, ever been identified and never been used to sort of give you a performance review in that sense. Because even in performance reviews, the ones that I've had, there's never been like KPIs that I've been measured against. It's been, I'll talk to somebody in your department, I'll talk to your line manager, I'll talk to your, a student or whatever, or a number of students, and we'll get a feel for how you're doing in the job.
Yeah.
South
Yes,
Australia is a little bit different than that. Certainly in leadership roles, you do actually have measurable outcomes that you are supposed to have. I'm not sure about the independent sector anymore, but in government in South Australia, they do have that. I'm not saying they have particularly well-written ones, and they generally
No.
tend to use them for sometimes quite nefarious purposes, but they are
I think
moving.
Victoria's the same, actually, you know, in the government area. But I know, like, because I've been in the Catholic sector and now I'm in the independent, and you know, I'm not seeing anything really substantial in that regard.
And I actually think this is such a good point, Sheens, to bring the conversation back to that earlier point around agency. So now that we have talked about how important these are and how important it is to have this kind of framework, even just for yourself, then it doesn't have to be a lengthy process, and it doesn't have to be a 3-hour meeting or anything like that to kind of rake them over the coals or anything. But it's just the simple question of like, what's important to me in my job, and what does it look like to do a good job? And if you have that clarity and you have that written down somewhere that you can keep coming back to, then you can still bring it out in this process and be more effective, but you'll likely be more effective in your day-to-day operating as well, because when, like we know from education, when you're up against the wall and there's a bazillion things that you need to do, you can come back to that as your kind of guiding principle to be like, okay, this is what's actually really important to me in my role. And this other stuff may or may not be, you know, life or death at this point in time. So it's actually just really good for creating that clarity. Annalisa.
I'm presuming that you're probably going to cover this later on or through the process of the seminar, but I'm interested to know, you know, when you're going for a job and they've got a salary range, how you negotiate that conversation as well. I was just thinking about that because, you know, I might not be able to change where I am, but, you know, other things on the horizon might be different.
Yes. So definitely this point around your value add. So it's kind of like, what is it about your experience? What is it about your expertise that has you at the top of that range? So specifically to answer your question, when we think about going for a new role, it's kind of thinking about, you know, what is your experience that you bring in, looking at the job description and going, what are the things that they've listed as being really important, and being able to demonstrate, and this is where we have to get over ourselves a little bit, ladies, but being able to demonstrate that we're excellent operators in those areas and brag a little bit, you know. And I've got an exercise for that later on in a second too. Brilliant. All right. Does anyone need to take a sip of water, or everyone's glued to their seats? I can see. I'm going to take a sip. Cheers. Annalisa will join me. Jen's got her bottle. Very good. You've got to stay hydrated in these chats. This is thirsty work. Okay. So once you have landed on your number, it's really important to decide what is important. So, like I alluded to earlier, for some of us, it's a cash thing. You know, it's, you want a fixed amount of money, you're playing for a bonus scheme, you're playing to open up a commission conversation, maybe in certain situations. For you, it's a cash game because that's what's going to serve your goals and the things that are really motivating you and lighting you up. For other people, actually, it's going to be more about actually leveraging that to work fewer hours. I've had conversations with people this year who have really successfully negotiated to maintain their salary and go down to 4, even 3 days a week. So actually using it as a conversation opener to be able to buy that time back for yourself is really, really important, depending on what is important to you. The other thing, depending on what stage of your career you're at and what your objectives are, consider a professional development budget. So it might be like, cool, okay, well, you might only have X amount of money available, but how can we swing it in terms of professional development? Because that not only is going to have benefits for me, and that's what's important for me in driving my objectives, but that has massive benefits for the business, for you to be engaged in that work and for them to be supporting you doing it. The payoffs are enormous in this work. which is coincidentally, side note, why I do it, because the payoffs are so big. Also playing around with employee shares and things like that. Maybe you're in a situation where you're working for a smaller business and they genuinely don't have as much flexibility as a larger business, and they're willing to be open and honest with you about that. Then how can you buy in? I'm playing around with this strategy at the moment for a few different situations, and it's actually a really fun one to dabble in and to learn about and to get educated in, is what can it look like to either buy into a business through employee share schemes or through other avenues. How else can they kind of sweeten the deal in that respect? And then promotion, which is the one that I alluded to earlier for myself, like that was in 2019, that was my angle, was I want to actually demonstrate using kind of more of an economic model, how much value I'm adding to the business, and then use that to leverage to get an opportunity where I can serve the people in my team to a greater extent, and I can add more value for them and do work that lights me up more. And when we look at different motivations and things like that, for me, definitely one of the big motivators of doing well in a job is actually so I can pass that knowledge on to others. And I've got a couple of teachers in the room, so I'm imagining that there's a bit of shared experience in that too. So yeah, once you have your number, like decide what's important and structure your argument accordingly. So yeah, think about what's important, think about in what order of priority as well, because in some instances, it might not have to be just one of those avenues that you're playing with. Get flexible again in that sense of what could it look like to get a combination, or to create that kind of combination. It might be something brand new for the business to play with as well. Very good. Nods, cool. All right, problem number 3, or challenge number 3. You initiate the conversation, you know your number, you know your outcome, but then you get in there and you don't actually negotiate. Now, this is a really classic scenario. We alluded to it earlier, when people on the other side of the conversation don't necessarily have negotiating skills and they take a really fixed and hard line. I've actually had that experience since I've been in business as a coach. When I first started coaching, I took a very hard line on my numbers and things like that. And it was very freeing and liberating to open up this more negotiation style of modeling, even just within my own business, and to practice these skills more, just even as a business owner. So yeah, oftentimes what I've seen in people, particularly for people where there's an emotional charge in the conversation around, Derek over there is earning $20,000 more than me and he does half the work that I do. Oftentimes we come into these conversations with, either I get this outcome or I'm going to leave, which is fine. I mean, horses for courses. However, there's the middle space, or the liminal space in between, that is way more fun to play in and way less stressful as well, because it means you can come in with that open-mindedness and that flexibility of a range of different options that might be still suitable for you. When jobs are advertised these days, they often come with a salary range. And so I'd really encourage you guys to have the same when it comes to not necessarily a salary range, but a number range or some different options for how you would want things to play out, so that when you get into the conversation, they don't just say no to the first one and you go, oh, okay, well, I guess that's the end of that. Like you have a range of where you might like things to go. And the other thing around all of this that I want to really stress to you when it comes to the number, or whatever it is that you land on as being your number, you want to go up from that as your starting position. Because if you start there, you're going to end up less. So when you think of your range, you want to actually start at the top of your range and come back down, because that's how you know that you're going to max out the amount of money or whatever compensation you're looking at that you're going to get. And believe you me, they're doing the same thing at the other end. And that's part of the dance as well. As a business, they want to offer you the lowest amount of money. And that's why when you have really loyal employees that are on just like absolutely laughable salaries compared to their counterparts who've come in later in the scheme of things. It's because there's actually no incentive to the business unless you ask for it to just give you one out of the kindness of their heart, because then that's money that they might need later on to keep an employee that's really valuable who's about to be poached by somebody else. And so it's actually for risk mitigation from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense. So looking at negotiation and how we actually present the negotiation. So depending on how the conversation is open and depending on whether it's you that's initiated this conversation or whether it's just a natural performance review, pay review process that already exists, you want to start by presenting the facts, but you don't want to give your number until they give a number. And I think it's super, super important, particularly as women, it's super important not to start with your number, because the odds of you lowballing yourself at this point in time, we've already talked about beliefs and all of that kind of stuff playing in. Don't even let that into the conversation. Let them lead. And then you can go from there. But if you start with your number first and they actually were thinking way out over here, then you miss out on that possibility, because they're operating from the premise that you're going to start with your top number. And so let them lead and sit in the discomfort of the risk that they're going to lowball you, and just let that be. And then open up the possibility that they might actually go higher, much higher. And this was the case of what happened with the person I was talking to about earlier, who went into like one conversation and came out with $30,000 extra. There's no way that she went into that conversation with that number at $30,000. She presented the case and got their number first, and then was like, oh shit, yeah, okay, I'll take that. That's good. Thank you very much. How'd it go? Annalisa, question.
If they have put a range in an advertisement in a paper, in a Seek or wherever, and they've already given you their range, do you still wait for them to offer something within that range, or do you go ahead and give them the number that's at the top of that range?
So I would still wait to hear, because the range is kind of like what they have available in their bucket. And also the other really important point on this, that's what they have available in their bucket that they don't need to get additional clearance for.
Ah,
That
okay.
is
Yep.
Beck smiling and nodding. People talking about this. This is
I'm so dumb.
No. Look at you coming into these
Oh my God.
conversations and learning all of this information. It's amazing. So many
Yeah.
people don't know this. So many people don't know this. I've had so many conversations with people about this very webinar where people are like, holy shit, no one teaches you how to do this. Salespeople, and Lisa, salespeople who've been selling their entire careers who don't do these conversations because it make it mean something about themselves and their self-worth. And they have all of the skills. They know the game inside out, back to front, and they make the businesses that they work for stupid money, crazy money. And yet they still will not do this process justice for themselves. So you are exactly where you need to be. And so many people don't know that when a job is advertised, and when they have a essentially like that bracket, that's the amount of funds that they have clearance for, that they won't need to get additional approval for. But if a candidate is attractive enough and going to add enough extra value to the business, then they will fall over themselves to do whatever dance they need to do with their finance manager to get that person into the business. They will make it happen. And so I just want to open up that possibility for all of you as well, that the advertised range is not, it's a good indication, and I'm glad that businesses have started to bring that in, because it is way more helpful than just having one particular number or not talking about the number at all until the very end of the process. However, that is not where the game stops. There is always more available funds for someone who can add more value to a business. It really just becomes in making that case, making that business case.
And Annalisa, can I just say I have observed in government this year that they also negotiate.
Mm.
I nearly fell off my chair, but they do.
I came in because I obviously come out of the private sector, and I had those assumptions as well coming into this when I was doing my prep for all of this, that government would be a different scenario. And I was very swiftly corrected by someone who I was doing some prep work with that absolutely not. But you can still make your case in the same way that you would in the private sector and see what happens. Play the game. So I don't know where Chloe's gone because this is her favorite slide. She wants to laugh about it. When they go low, we go high. So say they come in, here she is, she wants to have a chuckle at this. But so classic Michelle Obama quote, but really what we're talking about here is say you do have a situation where the number that they give you is dramatically lower, or even just any lower than what the number is that you had in mind, your starting position. This is where you don't do what everyone else does, which go, thanks very much, I'm going to go and sit at my desk and fume for the next 10 years and do nothing further about it. This is a great opportunity to open the conversation further. Amazing. I see that you too have done some research. I have done mine. I'd love to get a little bit more context around how you've arrived at this number, because the research that I've done around market rates has me sitting here. Please explain. The other one that's really, really impressive actually to hear people use is amazing. How else can I add value in the business to be able to bridge the gap between what I have in mind and what you have in mind? What else can I do? What more skills can I learn? What else can I bring through? What else is in my back pocket that I can flip out and provide to the team that is going to make me even more valuable in the work that I do? And this is also the opportunity for you to revisit priorities and different compensation options. Employers, by and large, are not used to having sophisticated conversations about this. They are used to emotions getting the better of people in these conversations. And they are used to people shutting down and tapping out at this point and making it mean something about themselves and going, oh, I must not be worth that much money then. It's not the case. There's always a way. First of all, it's not the case because your self-worth is not related to your value 100 times. But also, there's always another way to do the dance. And so keep the conversation open. Get curious. Explore it. Who knows what can come out of that mindset and that conversation? Opportunities that individually neither of you would have spotted or neither of you would have thought of. And so keep your line and get creative and use it as an opportunity to ask questions, ask intelligent questions about what else is possible. But yes, so that is a really, really, really important point that people often miss is they hear that low number, they shut down internally, and they go, I need to get out of this conversation. Yep, that's fine, whatever, great, thanks very much. Leave, get back to their desk, fume. And so this is what we can do at this point in time. If you can hold the line emotionally, and we are going to get to that, bear with me. If you can hold the line emotionally, there's so much that's possible out of these conversations. And this is where as well, this also keeps the line of communication open for further conversations. Like I mentioned earlier about the conversation that I opened in 2019. That ended up being a series of conversations that we had over months that ended up with me in a new role. So depending on what your goals are and depending on what game you're playing, the more open-minded you can be and the more you can keep that conversation open, the greater possibility is there for you. Because you're starting to connect the other person with information that they really need to advocate on your behalf and to sponsor you in rooms that you are not in, depending on who you're having this conversation with. Alrighty. I've just thrown a lot of information at you. Any questions? Comments? Observations? We've got mums in the room now. We love to see Lee. Brilliant. All right. So before we go into the tools, the 4 pillars of this are take ownership, know your value, know your outcome, and do the dance. Do the negotiation. Let it unfold. Ask questions, stay curious, and use the evidence that you have researched and put together as your starting position to open the conversation. All right, who's ready for some tools? Time for tools. Woo! Okay. So the first thing that we're going to circle back to is around emotions and emotional charge. So as we've talked about already tonight, it can be really common for negative emotions to come up when we think about these conversations, initiating these conversations, being a part of them at all, let alone standing up and being like, actually, I believe, based on my research, that this salary should be $20,000 higher, $30,000 higher, $40,000 higher. All of these feelings that can come up, which you ladies have brilliantly alluded to already tonight. The fear of getting it wrong and messing it up, worrying about what it is that it's going to mean about you to have these conversations powerfully, being really pissed off about the fact that Derek across the way gets $20,000 more for doing way less work and adding way less value. So what's really, really important is to neutralize these emotions before you get into the room. It's super important. I've seen people absolutely bomb in these conversations because they come in absolutely guns blazing with all of this emotion. And then that's also when you often hear people say things like, but it's not fair. So-and-so earns more than me. The cost of living is so high. All of these things that are irrelevant in the context of this conversation. And it's not to say that they aren't important, and it's not to say that they don't exist. But in this conversation, it's not a winning argument to come in with points like that, because that's not something that you can hold up against a business case. The finance manager is not going to care about the fact that Derek from accounts gets paid $20,000 more than you. So it's really, really, really important to take ownership of the emotions that we feel, because the emotions that we feel are ours, and neutralize those emotions before we get into the room. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through a guided visualization-y type exercise where we're really going to start to tap into those emotions and those feelings in our bodies and breathe into them and start to like really feel what it feels like to let them release. Is anyone feeling any frustration, anger, or fear right now in their body? Just listen to me talk about it. Okay, good. I like that. Cool, calm, and collected. I'm going to get some nice little whale soundy bowl music on. How's that? Beautiful. All right. Feel with me. Okay. So, everyone take a big deep breath. And as you exhale, you close down your eyes. And I want you to imagine you are sitting in the waiting room, waiting for your pay negotiation, pay review conversation to kick off. You're sitting in the chair outside of the room. The person that you're about to have the conversation with is in another meeting, so you're just waiting patiently. And you're just playing over in your mind all of the things that you want to get across in this conversation, all of the things that you want to say, your priorities, all that kind of stuff. And I want, in this situation as well, you are coming into this conversation to ask them to double your pay. And I want you to just get a sense, as I say that, where that lands in your body. Are there any emotions that are coming up for you right now? Any fear, any anger, any frustration? I just want you to drop in and get a sense of any of those negative emotions or unpleasant emotions, where that's actually sitting in your body. Is that up in your heart space? Perhaps it's in your throat. Perhaps it's in your belly button. Wherever it is perfect. And as you really, really focus in on that area that's carrying all of that emotion, I want you to just really pay attention to that now, where that area is in the body. And really get a sense of it. And let it be. And now, I want you to draw your attention to somewhere in your body that doesn't feel that way. Maybe it feels neutral about the whole situation. Maybe it even feels positively hopeful. I want you to draw your attention to that positive feeling, that neutral feeling, that new sensation. Really draw all of your attention to that part of the body. Maybe there's just a sliver of hope in your pinky finger. That's enough. That's perfect. So I want you to draw all your attention to that place in your body that is feeling either neutral, or feeling positively about the situation. And I want you to take a big, deep breath in. As you breathe out, I want you to allow that positive feeling or that neutral feeling to travel through your body all the way to that spot where the old emotion is. I want you to allow that positive sensation, that neutral sensation, to flood your body with that sense. As you do that, I want you to breathe into that spot where that old emotion was, and big, deep, until you feel it melt away. Almost like when you put a baraka into some water and it just dissipates away. Just let it drift away. Keep breathing into that spot. Keep breathing into that spot until any tension that was there is released. While you're there, I want you to take this opportunity, the version of you that's sitting in that waiting room, I want you to take the opportunity to thank the version of you that's sitting here in this webinar tonight. For taking agency, for learning these skills, and for coming into this conversation with an open mind, well prepared, of certainty of the value that you bring and your expertise and your essential contribution. All right. So I want you to take one more deep breath in here. Breathe out. And then when you're ready, come on back into the room. Hello. Welcome back. Alrighty. Chloe might still be in there. We'll leave her there. All right. What did you notice? What feels different now? Any thoughts? Go back.
Bit more of a sense of control.
Very good.
I noticed
Yeah, no,
tension
go
in,
ahead, Melissa.
oh sorry. I noticed the tension in my throat and in that almost starting to cry kind of thing. And I hate that because it's such a female weakness kind of, trope.
Oh.
But it did appear to help. So
Yeah. And it's often just knowing. I just wanted to open up that possibility. And I did see a few laughs when I said double the pay, which is perfect too. But I did just want to give you that access to using this tool whenever you need to, whenever you feel that sensation coming up and you don't need it in that moment in time, because all emotions are just information, right? And so as long as you recognize them and you go, I see you, and I see what you're trying to tell me. Oftentimes when we carry it in our throat, it's things that we're not saying, right? And so acknowledging it, and a really, really simple version of this that you can do anytime is acknowledging it and then just breathing into that spot until the tension releases. That also works really well. So yeah, just giving you a bit of an access to some of these more embodiment tools that we don't typically tend to use or think about when it comes to these things, because we stay so in our heads that we forget that sometimes it's our body that's actually running the show. So yeah, good. I like that. Sense of control from Beck. I like that. Very good. Agency over our emotions. Sheena, did you have something that you wanted to say? Did you put your hand up and then put it back down, or?
No, I was going to say mine still stayed in the head. Because when you said double, it wasn't like a strong emotion about, anger or anything like that. It was more just sort of like disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of felt in my head, being the practical side of me always appears, it was more like a cold kind of void sort of thing that I was envisioning was because I'm thinking, I don't. It comes back to this sort of like, I don't necessarily believe that I'm worth double that, double my income,
Yeah.
But then in sort of going through the process, my brain started thinking, and I was thinking in terms of the things that you were saying about being well prepared, do your research, have the things listed, know the points that you want to bring forward to sort of support that approach if you're going to go that way. And so then the heart kind of kicked in, and when you said something about being neutral, at first it was neutral, and then that slither of hope you mentioned, and I kind of thought, I could, there's always a chance. That sort of a approach was kind of how I went through it. But I'm never very good at doing those visualization things.
No, there's no perfect way, and there's no right or wrong way to do them, James. That's the best part, is it's all about, and especially if you're someone who spends a bit of time in your head, it's all about getting out of your head and into your body and what's your body telling you. Because quite often we can get some really powerful learnings from that more embodiment experience. And that really is the key thing when we think about, to kind of Beck's point earlier, Annalise's point earlier, about knowing all of this shit about agency, being able to teach someone about it until the fucking cows come home, versus actually like integrating it, embodying it, and modeling it. So oftentimes embodiment is that missing piece between the intellectual understanding and the actual experience of it. So yeah, I love to give a little woo-woo moment in a webinar for people. Bring you back into body. All right. Ah, this is my favorite topic. I love it so much. I love it so much because I feel like we talk way too fucking much about, you know, all the ways that we can improve and all of the things that we can do differently, and, you know, criticizing ourselves for this and that and the other thing. It's so refreshing, and actually from like a neuroscience perspective, super important to give time to your strengths and to actually focus in on your strengths. If you're looking to do something, if you're looking to stop doing something, then like punishment is really effective for that. Discipline is really effective for stopping inaction. When you want to actually do something and move towards something, then the affirmations, the positivity, the strengths-based feedback, all of that kind of stuff is actually way more motivating towards something. So it's actually super important for lots of different reasons, but especially in this context, because the other person is going to need you to explain what it is that you're good at. It's just a fact. You're going to need to explain it. And so you can't go under it. You can't go over it. You've got to go through it. But let's play. This is a tool that I really, really love for looking at strengths. So if we divide up and if you guys have a piece of paper with you, this is a really, really brilliant time to pull that out and draw these quadrants out on the piece of paper. If you put the labels maybe in the top there, because we're going to write some things in the quadrants in the next exercise. But essentially, just to give you a sense of what we're doing here, or what this all means, I'll start with the zone of genius, of course, my favorite. So when we look at a zone of genius, this is the stuff that you are just like bomb at. Like, you are excellent at this. You could do it all day. You love to do it. You are great at it. This is the shit that lights you up. And I've got some examples of like particular qualities and things like that on the next slide for you to kind of populate this with, so you can get really specific on what this is. But essentially, like, this is the stuff where it's like, if you did this all day, your life would just be like incredible, delicious. This is all the best parts of whatever it is that you do. Your zone of excellence is the shit that you're still really, really good at. Like, you excel in these areas. Just maybe doesn't light you up as much as the things that are in your zone of genius. You know, you can still do a really, really good job of them, but it's not quite as satisfying as when you're in your zone of genius. The next layer of this is your zone of competence. This is shit that you can do. You don't love it, but you can get it done if you need to. And then you have your zone of incompetence, where it's like, really, this should be someone else's job. This is your stuff that it's just like, if you do it, it's going to take you forever to do, and it's pretty inefficient, and it's just not stuff that you like to do or stuff that you're particularly good at. So yeah, just to give you a bit of color around all of that. So now that you've got your quadrants all drawn out, I've got some classic workplace qualities or traits, or whatever you want to call them, here listed out for you to get used as a jumping off point. So feel free to use this list here and start to populate those quadrants for yourself. Now, if there's something in here where it's like, actually, I'm really good at this part of that, but I'm not so great at, or I don't enjoy so much this part of that particular trait, then get as granular as you want with this. I had someone ask me the other day about this when it came to like business acumen, for example. If there was something that, like, one area of the business acumen side of things that they're really good at, one that not so much, like, get that granular for yourself. Really give yourself that color. This is just kind of a jumping off point to give you some ideas. And these are seen as kind of the top traits of people in their workplaces at large. So are you a killer communicator? Are you someone who is really good at kind of enrolling people in a vision and leading people through it? Are you someone who always takes initiative a lot of the time over and above the people that you work with, and it's something that you really enjoy doing, get a lot of satisfaction out of? Are you someone who's like super reliable, someone who's going to be there on time every time, and someone who's going to be that person in the meeting who's like, actually, Alex, we need to stop talking because otherwise we're not going to get through all of this content and we need to move on to the next point? Got to have people like that in your organization. Believe you me, I'm lacking them at the moment in mine. But looking at adaptability, are you someone who is really flexible and loves change and loves to be in a dynamic situation and operates really well in those situations where you might need to turn on a dime? But are you someone who's really responsible with your emotions? And so that makes you a really excellent person to be involved in situations where there might be conflict, because you really bring a real sense of ownership over your own emotional capacity, and you've got really awesome tools in place in terms of your emotional intelligence. Problem solving, innovative thinking, and creativity cannot be understated, cannot be overstated how important it is to be able to think flexibly and think creatively and find new solutions to things. It's kind of what we've been talking about all night. Are you someone who loves to learn and are always pushing yourself into learning new things, even outside of work, and that you can bring some more of that into your work? Just a voracious learner and a student, first and foremost, of everything. That's a great mindset to bring into work. And are you someone who is great at running a spreadsheet, great at running a calendar, great at getting everything teed up and aligned, and great at getting projects off the ground? At what stage of projects do you work best? These are all different things to consider. And once you start populating your quadrants, thinking of particular examples as well is really helpful. Of, you might be someone who absolutely thrives when it comes to planning and organizing. And so call to mind a couple of examples of that, because you're going to need them. What did we learn? Any insights? Any ahas? Any questions?
There's a lot of things I do that fall into the zone of genius.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
We could have told you that already, Sheens.
How
Yeah,
good
but
is that?
doubting Nanny here.
Yeah.
All,
You would never
all of
bloody
my-
heard it.
all of my zone of incompetence things are what this seminar is about.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, that's the other thing, Annalisa. Like, I've had to learn a lot about this through being a one-woman show. For me in my business, a lot of it is around the financials and all of that kind of like spreadsheety accounty stuff that just makes me go, but I know it's important. And so I need to get better at it, essentially. If I'm going to be in business, that's just a fact. And so for me, it's about investing in support for that and getting more information and getting more skills and getting more tools in that area. And so that's the other possibility with the zone of incompetence stuff, is it doesn't have to stay there. I mean, ideally, yeah, it'd be great to have someone else doing some of that stuff for us. But unfortunately, when it comes to negotiations, you really do got to be in the room and advocating for yourself. And it's a great skill to learn that you're going to have with you for life. So yeah, very good share. Thank you. Good to get. Jen. Oh, Jen. Tell us.
Away on the chat bar the whole time. I did the box, and then I got to think of examples And I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting because some of them I had very, very similarly. I found that I had a lot of zone of genius with all of the stuff that I've learned. But it's interesting because it's like when you're relating things, you're like, well, what relates to certain jobs and what's relevant? Because when I was like leadership, I've had so many leadership positions at school, but I'm like, well, they probably don't really care about that now that I'm older. You know, so much can happen from high school to, you know, being in an older age. So it's like they might be looking for that type of leadership, or they might be looking for leadership within a business sort of thing. So it's very directive, all the different questions, and yeah.
Mhm. The other gift I do just want to give you on this point about leadership though, is don't discredit the contribution that you've made to NLP training.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Oh yeah,
That is such a phenomenal example of leadership, and your ability to be like the youngest person in the room and add so much value and speak your mind and speak your truth and share with people and really add value in a serious way in that respect as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you would come back to this kind of stuff and reflect on it after the session, and I think if you look into it enough, there will be concrete examples in each of these areas for your zone of genius. Yeah, they are more recent than you think.
Yeah, for sure. It's just about digging. That's all it is.
Yeah, you got to dig.
Yeah.
Gotta dig. But I'm trying to be a slave to the time today, and I see how much time we've got left. But I trust that you guys will take this exercise with you and go where you need to go with it after this as well, and keep playing with it. And it's actually a really great tool. Thinking of you, Beck, it's actually a really great tool to work out team structures and things like that as well. Like what's missing within a team, and how can we then bring someone in who's going to really love doing this kind of work that the rest of us just don't want to do. So very interesting from a team building standpoint as well, to get everyone to kind of like do this kind of activity and pull it together. Very good. All right. Well,
Can I just make an observation though about the genius, zone of genius? If the definition of that is something we get lost in, I can do that. I know what mine is. I love taking strategic and making it operational. Give me a problem, and that is a bit of a tricky problem, and let me at it. Like that's me, my absolute happy place. The danger of spending too much time in that place is because I'm so wrapped up in what I do there, and I just lose time, and I can just do whatever. The other stuff doesn't necessarily get done, or I lose people along the way that have to actually come with me on that journey. So the genius stuff has to be managed as well, given the context that you're in. You can be too genius.
No, that's a really good observation and a really good point to bring it back to, like, I think in a salary negotiating setting, having clarity about what the things are that you can get lost in is super important. And then when it comes to your day-to-day, of course, like managing the time for other tasks that you have that are not your zone of genius, to make sure that those things are prioritized,
actually get done.
And knowing that you actually are going to need to probably allocate time for those things, because if left to your own devices, you are probably going to default to the things that you love the most, which is natural. But yes, very good point around putting in that structure, and like now having that clarity of what exactly those things are, making sure that you're setting up your work life. I actually think a really awesome follow-up from this, when you think about your day-to-day operations now, is to take this quadrant and then kind of map it across. Okay, well, how key is this particular area in my role right now, and how much time am I devoting to it in a week, a month, however long a time frame is, if you wanted to take it further. And then again, like adding color to that and going, oh, I really love this and I get lost in it, but I might be over indexing in it. And so how can I restructure the time that I'm spending, or the way that I'm working, so that the other things still get attended to, and I can maybe come back to that at the end of the day when I'm like lowest energy and really need that boost of doing something that I love. So yeah, information is power. Hey.
Actually, interesting. I was sitting on a panel once, and you know how you get the question, oh, what's something about yourself you need to improve? Or tell me about one of your weaknesses and how you manage that, which is invites a really negative headset. So I was really tuning in before, Alex, when you were talking about that. And this person, it was the best answer. And they said, essentially, my strength can also be my weakness. And I just have to be very conscious to make sure. So they just talked about their strengths continually.
Yeah.
But they were given that opening in to say, oh, you know, what's something you need to work on? And they completely controlled the conversation. I just sat there and went, that is gold. Like, that is literally the best strategy I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it was really effective. So technically they did say, I need to just make exactly as you just did then. I need to start my day prioritizing the tasks. I use a list, I do this. That then frees up the time for me to really, and then kept talking all about their strength.
Yeah.
I'm just going, best strategy ever.
Yeah.
So, and I've never seen the format for how you might do that, but those zones,
yeah,
a really good way of perhaps when you're prepping for an interview to pick up something out of there.
Yeah. And when you're looking, the other layer to it, of course, is when you're looking at roles. Am I playing to my strengths in this role? What kind of roles might I like to take? Or what's actually important to me about the work that I do outside of what the role title is and all the other shit, or even the industry that I'm within. Like what is actually what is it about the structure of work that I really enjoy? What kind of working structure do I want and does work for me?
Yeah.
So
it's a bit of a genius one, Alex. I haven't seen that before and I really like it.
Well, pinch it. You can have that one back.
And thank you.
You can keep it. Yeah, I especially love it for team building. Like, that's the framework that I'm looking at when it comes to building out my team in the business.
Yeah.
Is starting first of all with kind of like, where are my zones of incompetence and how could someone come in and really add value in my business right away by doing all of the things that I don't enjoy doing, and really bring that fresh energy to those tasks and get across them. So yeah, very good. So the last thing that I wanted to bring in before we wrap up, I apologize, Tam, we might run a few minutes over it. If you need to run off, I totally understand. I'll make sure you get the recording. But this is the last thing that we're looking at before we wrap up. And I really, really did just want to touch on the power of personal testimonials. So you can call this whatever you want. You can call it your strengths folder, or you can call it your positive feedback folder, or I really like personal testimonials because it reminds me of, in business, what you actually there's a similar process that you go through when you have a business and you're getting feedback from customers and internally and things like that. So the purpose of personal testimonials is essentially to gather up all of the evidence around your strengths and your unique strengths and the specific way that you are excellent, and bring them into one place so that whenever you need it, you can get like a bomb of really, really powerful and positive, I guess affirmations is technically the correct word, but that real affirming sense of like, this is what I'm really good at. Because sometimes when we come into these interview settings or we come into these negotiating settings, it's so powerful to have that to call back on just before we go into that setting, because we're changing the way that our mind is thinking about it. And again, creating that certainty within ourselves before we go into that setting. So this is something I've got to say, I think I mentioned this on LinkedIn the other day. This is something that I wish I had done earlier in my career, and I think it would have been game-changing for me. Is every time that someone sends a positive note to you on Teams, on Slack, on email, whatever messaging service you're using, taking a screenshot of that, putting it into your folder. Every time someone says something to you that feels really powerful, getting that down in a quote, putting that in a spreadsheet, however you want to keep track of it is perfect, but just bringing all of that data together, essentially to provide evidence to your brain that you are an expert, you are excellent, you are brilliant at what you do. And you would be surprised how much of this stuff you can gather once you configure your reticular activating system, which is the part of your brain that's the pattern. Jen knows what I'm talking about. The part of your brain that is the pattern making and pattern spotting machine. Once you actually gear it towards looking for that positive stuff, you'll be amazed at how much of it you can find. So the trick here, of course, just like with constructive feedback, is to make sure that it's specific and make sure that it's actionable. You know the difference between when you get a compliment at the end of a presentation that is great job versus I really appreciated the way that you opened up the space for us today. It felt really intentional, and the way that you guided us through the agenda, and the fact that the agenda was really clearly outlined and given to us ahead of time made me feel really safe in the meeting and made me feel like I knew exactly what I needed to contribute. So thank you for that. It's such a different experience to receive feedback at that level than it is to receive, yeah, good job. And you can find it everywhere. You can find it in customers and the way that they're interacting with you. That was probably one of the most impactful things about working in my previous role, was the amount of customer feedback that we would get that was very specific, and you got a real sense of what a difference you'd made in their day. They really went out of your way when you had made a genuine difference in their day. They really went out of your way to let you know that. And that is so powerful. From within your team, from the leaders that you work with, from within yourself even, because some of us are what we would call a really strong internal frame of reference. And that means that the only person that's going to tell us that we've done a good job that we're going to hear is us. Sheena, I'm looking at you. So really, really, again, creating that body of certainty of like, yes, I am excellent at what it is that I'm doing. I am an expert in what it is that I do. I am adding value everywhere. And yeah, so essentially the purpose of this being that you bring all this evidence together in one place. You can review it whenever you need that pep up, whenever you're going into a difficult conversation, whatever it might be. And if you're feeling like, yeah, great, Alex, this is amazing information, but I don't get that kind of feedback, or I don't hear those things, then this is such an amazing opportunity for you and an invitation for you to model it with others. That is actually the only way to bring this kind of feedback into your world in a meaningful way, is to actually start to practice giving it out into the world. So when you see someone leading a meeting with excellence, or when you see someone, going out of their way to really support you with a question or whatever it might be, we're really taking the time to really get present with them and deliver the importance of that and what it is that they've just given. And also really paying attention to the people around you and the unique strengths that they're bringing in their particular situation, and pointing out things that they may not have noticed for themselves. So this is really an awesome invitation to you as we wrap all of this up, to really, really become observant in your world of all of the brilliance that exists around you, and making sure that the people who are being brilliant know it. And then also not being afraid to ask the people in our world as well to acknowledge us for something, or to let us know what it is that they enjoy about working with us. Let us know what it is that we do well, that they wish they could steal for themselves. Don't be afraid to ask those things of the people around you, to start building up this base so that you can go from there. Because that is how you create that kind of impact and that kind of affirmation for yourself of what it is that is already true, but you just don't see it because you're not looking for it, because we're too busy looking for all the negative shit. And that's not to say that you are, the bee's knees hot shit, which you are, and that you are untouchable. Of course, there will be moments where you are not excellent and you do not stand in your excellence, and that's perfect as well. But we put so much weight on those areas. She's very considerate, our Beck. She's very considerate at thinking of others and what they might need. But yes. And so this is a great opportunity for you to really get present to what it is that the people around you are doing magnificently, and open up an opportunity to share that with them in a way that's going to really land. So that is my task to all of you, is to go out into the world, pull together your personal testimonial folders, share that good news with the people around you that you care about, that you see, you know, in their own heads a bit much about all of the things that are going wrong. Sheena, I would love to hear from you. Go for it.
No, just thinking of it, it doesn't even have to be of a formal piece of paper. I'm thinking of my a dear principal that was really a mentor for me back in New South Wales, and he used to write a Christmas card to you. And in fact, it got to the point where you used to hang out for the Christmas card, because he used to tell you all the things about you that was brilliant and what you had done that year. And he used to just thank you for doing all the things that you did. But it was always such an uplifting thing. And when I came down here to Victoria, and I wasn't getting that in Victoria, I'd get out the cards and read them. And I haven't done it in a long time. And so when you were talking about it there, I was thinking, let's go and find those cards.
You better go and find those bloody cards, girlie. You gotta go get those cards out.
Yeah.
Because what
it was that kind of thing. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is cool. Hey, and because what we're building here, right, is we're building that, you know, we get all of this, we're looking for it first out in the world, and we're building all of this evidence, and we're creating all this certainty within ourselves to the point where we can be really grounded in it on our own. And we don't necessarily need that from others anymore, because we have that clarity, we have that certainty within ourselves, and we have that evidence. We have enough evidence that we're convinced that we're the shit. And that's not to say that that evidence won't continue to come in. You can keep building on it, and you can keep learning new things that you're awesome at, and new ways that you're evolving. And one of the things that's always most impactful for me is when someone takes the time to notice something that I would have previously thought of as a weakness for myself, or something that I had really actively worked to improve in, and someone notices that and goes, you know, I see the effort that you've put in, and I see the difference that it's making. Like, to me, that's always super impactful. And so there's always more layers that we can build onto this, in terms of, like, really, again, building this expansive and creative energy around ourselves and the value that we already bring, and knowing that there's more to come. Beck, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just really interested that if we did our homework, are we getting session 2?
You may. You may.
Aye.
Chloe and I have been in talks about session 2.
Excellent.
We are thinking November. And yeah, that more interactive workshop style layout. And also, Chloe is going to scream for me announcing this right now when it's not quite ready, but she's fucking going. We're also in the process of building out a Slack community. So a Slack community.
Yes, Slack is back.
Slack is back, baby. Slack is back and bigger than ever. And so essentially the idea behind that is that now that you've attended this session, you get welcomed into the Slack community, so you can all continue to support each other through integrating this knowledge and the situations that come up and everything that you bump up against. And obviously I'll be in that Slack community too, cheering everyone on. And it's a way to kind of keep this alive. And so it will be all of you here today, all of my other clients as well, coming into that community, and just really starting to create that sense of it's bigger than me and it's bigger than you, because we're all in this together and supporting each other.
That's exciting. I'm excited for that. Yes.
So Chloe's been cracking the whip on me and getting my actions done. I got some actions I need to do this week. We kind of set up the workspace last week, and I've just got some things I need to go in and do in terms of orientation and onboarding and things to make it a seamless experience for everyone, particularly for people who haven't used Slack before. And then, yeah, unleash you into it. That's the plan. And so you'll be able to feed straight in with any further session requests and things like that too. in terms of how we can keep this momentum moving and dive into any other areas as well.
Good.
Beautiful. All right. So as we wrap up, really keen to hear, what did you learn? And most importantly, because none of this becomes real until we actually start to act on it and integrate it, this just becomes a really great way to spend a Monday night until we actually start to bring these things to life and give them color in our actual lives. What's one action that you're going to take today or even tomorrow? I'll give you tomorrow as well because I know that it's late. What are we doing?
I'm going to start building my folder. I'm going to find
Yes!
those cards.
Jenny's going to go in the basement and dig out those bloody cards. Going to get the garage, get those boxes open in the garage, going to get those cards out. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Beck, what are you going to do? What's one action you're going to do?
I'm going to be much more conscious about giving feedback when people don't expect it in a way about what it is they've done that's really tangible. So being really specific about that in a work sense rather than probably more the matey off, that was great, thanks so much sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate, or I learnt this from you and I'm so glad you took, just something that is then a bit more useful for my colleagues too.
Yeah. Thoughtfulness and care. And you'll notice, Beck, that the more you do that, the more that you'll receive that as well.
Yeah.
And then you can put that in your own folder and put that in your own.
And my action is to, I know where my cards are, Sheens, they're under the bed. They can stay there because I'm actually going to fill out and really populate that quadrant and do a bit of reading around that. I find that really interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. And you guys are all going to get the recording as well, Beck. So if you want to come back and revisit any of this, then you'll get
I will.
Yeah. All right, Jen.
I said that I'm going to have a look for my folder too.
Good.
I have some physical testimonials and things, but I'll probably need to do a bit of a search on specific ones, which is good to, know. And I also said that I'm going to also start connecting my examples to my strength to audit quadrants.
I love it. All right. Annalisa, what about you?
Looking at my quadrants, I think I want to find some strategies for actually getting better at those interview or conversation phrases and having them more practiced in my head so I can access that information more clearly when I need it.
Perfect. I love that. And just to build onto that as well, once we get into the Slack community, that is a great opportunity as well to put together some role play sessions, practice sessions between us, between everyone here. So
That'd be great.
So that you can really start to play with some of those trickier, there's some great actors on this call, and really play with some of those stickier situations so you can really get grounded in how it is you actually show up.
Yeah.
Because a wise person told me yesterday that the hardest question to answer is the one you haven't answered before. So, yeah, leave you with that one. All right, Chloe, bring us home. What did you learn today? And what are you going to do?
I was just going to say, I think I'm going to seek some feedback. Otherwise, I'll just have the zone of incompetence will be full and the others will be empty. You know what I'm like? I'm really bad at identifying what I'm good at. So I need to,
Yeah, this whole session's for you, girl.
Yeah.
You take those notes.
We'll have to chat, Chloe.
Yeah, you wait.
I want to share in that one, Chloe. I've got a few ideas of things that you're actually very good at. So
yeah, there's a few people on this call who are going to be absolutely hounding you about this now that you've said it.
Once we get this Slack channel running, I'll be reaching out, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. The operator. Awesome. So I did just want to, before we wrap up, make sure, obviously we've talked about the Slack community and we've talked about some further sessions that may or may not be in the works in terms of continuing this line of work. If you wanted to get a little bit more personalized support wrapped around you for a particular challenge that you're up against or a particular transition that you're looking to make, and you really want me in that transition with you, like Jen has right now, then I'd invite you to reach out and let's play with what we can do around really, really releasing some of those beliefs, particularly really, really defining what it is that you want to create and what it is that you want this next season of your life to be about. Really, really having that emotional mastery so you can come in cool, calm, and collected. And also really, really big on habit creation in a way that doesn't leave you with a 5-hour morning routine that involves, 45 minutes of Kundalini activation every day and, 12 liters of celery juice and all of those good stuff. So like having habits and things that actually really support you for what you are right now and what you need and aren't over and above and crazy and actually going to support you to get done what needs to get done. So that is the one-on-one investment at the moment is just shy of $3,000. I do have payment plans that are available, and that does include a in-person full day breakthrough session to kick us off, and then some integration calls so that you can really integrate that change. So who is saying, damn, I'd love Kundalini and celery juice every day? Jen! I thought I would too, and now I'm just like, oh, some days you just roll out of bed and get started, hey? Not every day. Kundalinis are sometimes food in my house. Yes. Anyway, so I just wanted to put that across. And if you need to reach me, here's how you can do it.